The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to divine withdrawal ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the Great Withdrawal. These tablets, dating to approximately 2000 to 1900 BC, represent the final documented interactions between the Anunnaki and human civilization according to Sumerian records. What makes these documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact tone, lacking the typical religious flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts. The most significant of these tablets, designated as CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text begins with the standard invocation to Enlil, but quickly shifts to describe a gathering of the Anunnaki Council where a momentous decision was reached. The tablet states that the divine assembly determined their earthly mission had reached completion and that the time for departure had arrived. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports the narrative found in these tablets, revealing a sudden cessation of ritual activity around 1950 BC, with offering tables left in place and ceremonial vessels abandoned mid-use. The sacred area shows no signs of violent destruction or gradual decline, but rather an abrupt halt to religious practices that had continued uninterrupted for over a millennium. The administrative texts preserved in temple archives across Mesopotamia describe in unprecedented detail the internal deliberations that preceded the Anunnaki departure. Tablet VAT 17019 from the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin contains the most complete account of the final council sessions held at Nippur's Eka Temple complex. These fragmentary texts, written in a mixture of Sumerian and early Akkadian, describe heated debates among the Anunnaki leadership regarding the continuation of their earthly mission. The document reveals fundamental disagreements between different factions, with Enki, traditionally associated with wisdom and human welfare, arguing forcefully for maintaining direct oversight of human development. His position, according to the tablets, centered on concerns that humanity was not yet ready for complete independence, and that premature withdrawal could lead to civilizational collapse. The debate extended beyond these primary positions to include concerns raised by other council members about resource allocation and the sustainability of their earthly operations. The texts reference equipment failures, supply chain disruptions, and personnel shortages that made continued operations increasingly challenging. These practical considerations added urgency to the philosophical debates about the appropriate timing for withdrawal. Opposing Enki's view, Enlil himself advocated for immediate departure, and citing what the text refers to as the completion of the appointed cycles. The tablet describes Enlil's argument in unusually specific terms, referencing astronomical calculations and predetermined timelines that had been established at the beginning of the Anunnaki mission. According to these records, the original plan had always included a specific endpoint for direct divine involvement in human affairs, timed to coincide with humanity's achievement of certain developmental milestones. Tablet fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection describe Ninhursag's presentation of detailed accounting records showing the enormous expenditure of energy and materials required to maintain their earthly presence. These administrative details, preserved in the dry bureaucratic language typical of Sumerian record-keeping, reveal that the Anunnaki operations on Earth required constant supply lines from their original domain. The precision with which these resource requirements were documented suggests sophisticated logistical planning that extended across vast distances. The council sessions also addressed concerns about what would happen to human civilization if the withdrawal occurred without adequate preparation. Several tablet fragments describe presentations of data on human population growth, agricultural productivity, metallurgical advancement, and social organization complexity. These assessments were compared against predetermined benchmarks that had been established as criteria for human readiness for independence. The texts indicate that humanity had exceeded expectations in some areas while falling short in others, thus creating genuine uncertainty about the optimal timing for withdrawal. Enki's faction presented evidence of human innovations that had developed independently of direct divine instruction, arguing that these demonstrated sufficient creative capacity for continued progress. The examples cited include advances in irrigation technology, the development of written law codes, and innovations in astronomical observation. Most significantly, the Council debated whether the flood event that had occurred several centuries earlier had adequately tested human resilience and adaptability. Tablet CBS 10673 describes how the successful rebuilding of civilization after the deluge provided evidence that humanity could survive and progress without constant divine supervision. The flood had served as what the texts term a calibrated challenge, designed specifically to determine whether humans possessed the necessary qualities for independent development. The final weighing described in these council records involved comprehensive evaluation of all factors affecting the departure decision. Economic assessments showed that maintaining earthly operations was becoming increasingly burdensome. Timeline considerations indicated that the predetermined departure window was approaching. Human development metrics suggested that baseline capabilities had been achieved, though concerns remained about moral and spiritual development. Internal Anunnaki political factors also played a role, with various factions competing for influence over the final decision. The texts indicate that achieving unanimous agreement required extensive negotiation and compromise, with different council members making concessions on specific points in exchange for support on others. The decision-making process culminated in what the tablet describes as a binding decree that would govern all subsequent withdrawal activities and establish protocols for maintaining minimal contact during the post-departure period. Economic factors played a crucial role in the departure decision, according to multiple tablet sources discovered across various Mesopotamian sites. The Dream archive, discovered during excavations at Pusrish Dagon, contains livestock records that document massive increases in cattle, sheep, and goat deliveries to temple complexes during the period immediately preceding the departure. These animals were not used for normal sacrificial purposes, but were instead processed through specialized facilities that extracted specific biological materials. The tablets describe complex procedures for preparing these materials, including treatments with rare minerals and exposure to specific astronomical alignments. The quantities involved far exceeded the needs of normal temple operations, suggesting these materials were being prepared for transport elsewhere, possibly to support the departure operations themselves. The economic records from Girsu show dramatic increases in tribute requirements and labor obligations during the final decades of Anunnaki presence. Contemporary Sumerian administrative texts describe quotas for exotic materials, including specific types of gold, silver, and rare stones that were processed through temple workshops before being transported to locations not mentioned in typical trade records. The quantities involved far exceeded the needs of a normal temple operations, suggesting these materials were being prepared for some purpose beyond conventional religious or administrative functions. Silver Tablet CBS 16042 records transactions involving what the text calls sky metal, a material described as being more valuable than gold and possessing unique properties. This substance was collected from meteorite impacts across Mesopotamia and processed in temple workshops under direct Anunnaki supervision. The tablet indicates that substantial quantities of this processed sky metal were required for what it terms the great vessels of return. The language suggests these vessels were being prepared or maintained for the eventual departure, requiring specialized materials that could only be obtained from extraterrestrial sources. Chemical analysis of metallic residues found in temple workshop areas at Nippur has revealed unusual alloy compositions that include elements rarely found in terrestrial deposits, supporting the textual accounts of sky metal processing. Administrative records from Kanish, an Assyrian trading center in Anatolia, provide external confirmation of these unusual economic activities. Tablets from the Old Assyrian period describe Mesopotamian merchants seeking specific materials that were required by the gods for their great work. These texts mention contracts for rare minerals, precious stones of particular colors and clarity, and metals that required specialized smelting techniques. The merchants' records indicate that these materials commanded extraordinary prices and were always destined for temple complexes rather than normal commercial use. The precision with which material specifications were defined in these commercial texts suggests that the Anunnaki had provided detailed technical requirements to their human procurement agents. One particularly revealing document from Kanesh describes a merchant's frustration at being unable to fulfill an order for crystalline materials with specific optical properties, indicating that the required substances possessed characteristics that were difficult to obtain through normal mining and processing methods. The scale of resource mobilization described in these economic texts exceeded anything documented for normal temple operations or royal construction projects. The coordination required to procure materials from sources spanning the entire ancient Near East suggests centralized planning directed by authorities with comprehensive knowledge of regional resources and sophisticated understanding of material properties. References to the tablets of destinies scattered throughout Sumerian literature take on new significance when examined in the context of the departure decision. Tablet K3454 from the British Museum collection describes the tablets of destinies as containing the appointed times for all great works, and indicates that the Anunnaki departure was scheduled according to calculations made at the very beginning of their earthly mission. The astronomical component of these predetermined timelines becomes evident in temple records from Uruk that document detailed observations of planetary movements and stellar positions. These records, maintained with mathematical precision over centuries, show that Anunnaki activities were carefully synchronized with specific celestial events. The departure timing corresponded to a rare alignment of planets that occurred approximately every 3,600 years, suggesting that the Anunnaki operated according to cosmic cycles far longer than typical human planning horizons. The mathematical precision of these timeline calculations becomes apparent when examining the astronomical data preserved in multiple independent sources. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period, though compiled much later, preserve calculation methods that demonstrate continuity with the earlier observation programs documented during the Anunnaki presence. These texts include detailed ephemerids for planetary positions, eclipse predictions calculated centuries in advance, and stellar position measurements that account for precession effects. The sophistication of these calculations required astronomical knowledge and computational capabilities that exceeded documented Mesopotamian mathematical achievements by substantial margins. The 3,600-year cycle receives particular emphasis in texts describing the tablets of destinies. This period corresponds to what modern astronomy would recognize as the orbital period of a hypothetical massive planetary body in the outer solar system, though no such object has been definitively confirmed by contemporary observations. The ancient texts describe this cycle as the time of the Great Return, when the celestial pathways align to permit travel between Earth and the distant realm of the Anunnaki. The precision with which this cycle is calculated in multiple sources argues against dismissing it as mythological invention. Within the major 3,600-year cycle, the texts identify smaller subcycles of 600 years that mark periods of enhanced divine activity. Tablet AT 21,089 describes these 600-year intervals as times when communication between Earth and the Anunnaki domain becomes enhanced, and preliminary preparations for potential return activities may commence. The document provides specific astronomical markers for identifying these subcycle periods, including planetary alignments, solar activity patterns, and stellar configurations that create optimal conditions for maintaining contact across vast distances. The Sumerian king list, when examined in this astronomical context, reveals that the reigns attributed to antediluvian rulers correspond to multiples of 600 years, suggesting that these figures may represent administrative periods synchronized with celestial cycles rather than individual human lifespans. This interpretation resolves the apparent impossibility of the extraordinarily long reigns while preserving the mathematical precision documented in the text. The tablets of destinies are described not merely as documents recording predetermined events, but as computational devices capable of calculating future astronomical configurations and their implications for Anunnaki operations on Earth. Several texts describe these tablets as shining like stars and speaking with voices like thunder when activated, suggesting they incorporated technological components rather than being simple clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform text. The physical descriptions indicate devices constructed from unknown materials that possessed properties enabling complex calculations and possibly communication functions that facilitated coordination with distant Anunnaki authorities. Archaeological evidence from temple complexes throughout the region reveals a coordinated pattern of closure that occurred within a remarkably narrow time window. At the Great Ziggurat complex shows evidence of abrupt cessation of maintenance and ritual activity around the same period as Nippur. The temple's inner chambers contained partially completed renovation work, with tools and materials left exactly where workers had placed them. Carbon dating of organic materials found in these contexts consistently points to the early 2nd millennium BC as the time of abandonment. At Uruk, the situation presents even more dramatic evidence, with the Anu temple complex undergoing extensive modifications in its final phase of use. Archaeological evidence suggests these modifications were not repairs or improvements, but rather systematic preparations for long-term closure. The pattern of abandonment at Ur reveals careful planning rather than hasty evacuation. Excavations conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934 uncovered temple chambers, where valuable ritual objects had been carefully arranged and sealed rather than simply left behind. The sealing techniques employed bitumen, cedar resin, and other preservative substances applied in layers designed to maintain stable internal conditions for millennia. Inside these sealed chambers, archaeologists found intact ceremonial equipment, astronomical instruments, and tablets containing what appear to be maintenance protocols for the temple complex. The precision of the sealing work and the systematic organization of stored materials indicate that the closure was executed according to detailed plans designed to preserve the temple facilities for potential future reactivation. At Lagash, similar patterns emerge with even more elaborate preservation procedures. The temple precinct there contained chambers sealed with such precision that when archaeologists breached them in the 1980 excavations, the internal atmosphere had remained stable for nearly 4,000 years. Chemical analysis of the sealing materials revealed sophisticated understanding of preservation chemistry, with compound formulations that included antimicrobial agents, moisture absorbers, and oxidation inhibitors that protected stored materials from degradation. The chambers at Lagash contained not only texts and ritual objects, but also what appeared to be technical equipment whose function remained unclear to excavators. Bronze and crystalline components showed manufacturing precision that exceeded documented ancient Mesopotamian metalworking capabilities, suggesting these devices were produced using more advanced technological processes. The modifications at Uruk's Anu temple complex included installation of drainage systems designed to prevent water infiltration over extended periods, reinforcement of structural elements to ensure long-term stability, and creation of access passages that could be sealed from within. These engineering features indicate that the closure preparations anticipated thousands of years of abandonment while maintaining the possibility of eventual return. Temple inventories from this final period, preserved on administrative tablets, document the systematic cataloguing and storage of thousands of ritual objects, astronomical instruments, and texts. The level of detail in these inventories suggests that accurate records were essential for future recovery operations, implying that the Anunnaki intended to maintain knowledge of exactly what had been preserved and where it could be located. The coordination between different temple sites becomes evident through analysis of the abandonment dates and procedures. Multiple sites across Mesopotamia show cessation of activity within a window of approximately 50 years, and all employing similar sealing and preservation techniques. This synchronization required communication and coordination between temple administrations across vast distances, suggesting centralized planning directed by Anunnaki authorities. Administrative tablets from the final period describe messenger services and signal systems that connected different temple complexes, enabling real-time coordination of departure preparations. The consistency of preservation methods and the precision of timing indicate that the withdrawal was executed according to a carefully orchestrated plan rather than occurring as a series of independent local decisions. Hidden within the administrative appendices of crucial departure documents lies evidence of a secondary resolution that has received far less scholarly attention. The designation of specific Anunnaki individuals to remain on Earth in diminished capacities as guardians and observers. These remaining figures, referred to in the text as the Silent Watchers, or those who keep the threshold, were tasked with maintaining minimal contact points between the departed Anunnaki and human civilization, while ensuring that critical knowledge would not be entirely lost. Tablet B M 78,942 from the British Museum's collection provides the most detailed roster of these remaining guardians. The document, written in late Sumerian script with Akkadian glosses, lists 7 primary figures by name and function, each assigned to preserve specific domains of knowledge through indirect means. The decision to leave guardians behind represented a compromise between complete withdrawal and continued direct oversight. Council records indicate that this arrangement satisfied concerns raised by Enki about premature human independence, while addressing Enlil's insistence that the predetermined departure timeline be honoured. The Guardians would operate under strict protocols that limited their interactions with human populations, working primarily through dreams, symbolic communications, and guidance provided to selected human intermediaries. This indirect approach would allow preservation of critical knowledge without the intensive resource commitments required for maintaining full divine presence on Earth. The selection of the 7 Guardians involved careful consideration of their specific expertise and their demonstrated ability to work effectively with human populations through indirect methods. Ningishzida, traditionally associated with serpent symbolism and medical knowledge, was chosen as guardian of healing arts and biological sciences. His assignment to the Gishbanda temple complex near Lagash positioned him in a region with established medical training programs that could benefit from his continued guidance. Ninhursag accepted guardianship of agricultural knowledge, with responsibility for multiple sites across the Fertile Crescent that would enable her to monitor and support farming practices throughout the region. Nabu received assignment as guardian of written knowledge and scribal traditions, a role that recognized his previous involvement in developing cuneiform writing systems and training human scribes. His base at Borsippa would allow him to influence the development of scholarship throughout Mesopotamia, while maintaining sufficient distance to avoid detection by general populations. Ereshkigal's assignment as guardian of death rites and underworld mysteries positioned her at the Ganza temple complex, where she could ensure proper burial practices and preservation of teachings about consciousness and afterlife. Dumuzi received responsibility for pastoral and nomadic populations, maintaining knowledge systems related to animal husbandry and seasonal migration patterns. Anu himself, despite his supreme position in the divine hierarchy, agreed to maintain a reduced presence that would provide ultimate oversight of Guardian activities and serve as final authority for critical decisions. The 7th Guardian, whose name appears damaged in the surviving tablets, was assigned responsibility for metallurgical knowledge and craft technologies. Each Guardian received detailed operational protocols that specified the methods and limitations of their permitted interactions with human populations. These protocols emphasized the importance of working through established human institutions rather than revealing their continued presence directly. Ningishzida, traditionally associated with serpent symbolism and underworld knowledge, was designated as the primary keeper of medical and healing wisdom. The tablet specifies that he would maintain a presence at the Gishbanda temple complex near Lagash, where he would provide guidance to human healers through dream communications and symbolic visions during specific lunar phases. Archaeological excavations at Lagash have revealed chambers that show continuous occupation long after the official abandonment of surrounding structures. These chambers contained sophisticated medical instruments, pharmaceutical preparation equipment, and anatomical models that demonstrate advanced understanding of human physiology. The precision of these medical tools and the sophistication of the pharmaceutical compounds found in storage vessels suggest that Ningishzida's guardianship involved active maintenance of advanced medical knowledge systems rather than passive observation. The medical chambers discovered at Lagash during excavations conducted by the French Archaeological Mission between 1977 and 1989 contained instruments that demonstrate manufacturing capabilities far beyond documented ancient Mesopotamian metalworking. Surgical scalpels crafted from unknown alloys maintained edges sharp enough for precision incisions, despite millennia of storage. Analysis conducted at the Louvre Museum's Conservation Laboratory revealed that these blades incorporated microscopic serrations arranged in patterns that optimize cutting efficiency while minimizing tissue damage, a design principle not formally recognized in surgical instrument manufacturing until the 20th century. The alloy composition included trace elements in precise ratios that prevented corrosion and maintained structural integrity across thousands of years, suggesting metallurgical knowledge that exceeded contemporary capabilities. Pharmaceutical storage vessels found within the same chambers contained residual compounds that chemical analysis has identified as complex organic preparations, combining plant extracts, mineral compounds, and substances derived from animal tissues. The formulations demonstrated sophisticated understanding of drug synergies and bioavailability enhancement techniques. One vessel, designated Artifact L734 in the Baghdad Museum collection, contained traces of a compound that modern pharmaceutical analysis identified as possessing potent antimicrobial properties effective against bacterial strains that frequently cause mortality in ancient populations. The preparation method required precise temperature control during extraction and specific pH conditions during compounding, indicating access to chemical knowledge and processing equipment that should not have existed in ancient Mesopotamia. The anatomical models discovered in the medical chambers included detailed representations of human organ systems, crafted from fired clay and precious stones. These models displayed internal structures with accuracy that required dissection-based knowledge and systematic anatomical study. One particularly sophisticated model demonstrated the cardiovascular system with such precision that modern medical historians have confirmed its accuracy against contemporary anatomical understanding. The model showed not only major blood vessels, but also depicted the valvular structures within the heart chambers, details that were not officially discovered until the work of William Harvey in the 17th century. The presence of such accurate anatomical knowledge in ancient Mesopotamia suggests either extensive human dissection programs or access to advanced imaging technologies that could reveal internal structures without invasive procedures. Tablet fragments found within the medical chambers describe treatment protocols for various conditions using terminologies that demonstrate understanding of disease causation and progression. One text describes procedures for treating what it terms fever of the waters, a condition whose symptoms match those of bacterial dysentery. The treatment protocol includes specific dietary restrictions, administration of antimicrobial preparations at precise intervals, and maintenance of hydration through calculated fluid replacement. The sophistication of this treatment regimen demonstrates understanding of infection control and supportive care principles that were not formally recognized in Western medicine until the 19th century. The tablets also describe surgical procedures including trepanation techniques for relieving cranial pressure, cataract removal methods using specialized instruments, and bone-setting protocols for complex fractures. The dream communication protocols described in Guardian assignment texts receive detailed elaboration in medical texts from Lagash. These documents specify that healers seeking guidance from Ningishzida should undergo preparatory fasting periods lasting 7 days, sleep within designated chambers during specific lunar phases, and maintain detailed records of symbolic visions received during ritual sleep sessions. The texts describe how symbolic imagery would convey diagnostic information and treatment recommendations encoded in metaphorical language that required trained interpretation. Modern analysis of these dream communication protocols reveals sophisticated understanding of how symbolic information could be transmitted and decoded, thus suggesting that the Guardian communication system employed psychological principles that facilitated effective knowledge transfer while maintaining the appearance of divine inspiration rather than direct instruction. Ninkasag, despite her prominent role in earlier Anunnaki councils, accepted assignment as guardian of agricultural knowledge and fertility rites. The administrative records indicate she would establish a reduced presence at multiple sites across the Fertile Crescent, moving seasonally between temples at Kish, Adab, and Shurupak. Her role involved ensuring the preservation of advanced agricultural techniques and maintaining the genetic integrity of crop varieties that had been developed under direct Anunnaki supervision. Recent archaeobotanical analysis of grain samples from storage facilities at these sites reveals domesticated varieties with characteristics that exceeded natural selection capabilities, including enhanced nutritional content, improved disease resistance, and adaptation to specific soil conditions. The systematic distribution of these enhanced varieties across multiple temple centers suggests coordinated preservation efforts that continued long after the primary Anunnaki departure. The grain samples analyzed by archaeobotanists from the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute demonstrate characteristics that conventional plant breeding could not have achieved within the timeframes indicated by archaeological dating. Barley samples from Shurupak storage facilities, radiocarbon dated to approximately 1900 BC, show genetic modifications that increased grain size by 40% compared to wild varieties, while simultaneously enhancing protein content and improving drought resistance. Modern genetic analysis of these ancient grains reveals deliberate modifications to multiple gene sequences that control these traits, suggesting directed breeding programs guided by sophisticated understanding of plant genetics. The precision of these modifications and the speed with which they were achieved indicate access to selection methods or technologies that exceeded natural breeding capabilities. Wheat varieties preserved at Kish demonstrate similar enhancement patterns with additional modifications that improve disease resistance to fungal pathogens that commonly devastated ancient grain crops. Analysis of the genetic sequences responsible for these resistance traits reveals that they originated from wild grass species native to regions hundreds of kilometers from Mesopotamia, indicating that ancient agricultural specialists had access to diverse genetic resources and possessed techniques for transferring beneficial traits between distantly related plant species. This cross-species genetic transfer represents capabilities that were not achieved by conventional plant breeding until the development of modern agricultural biotechnology in the late 20th century. The seasonal movement pattern attributed to Ninkarsag in the Guardian texts corresponds precisely with optimal timing for agricultural interventions throughout the growing cycle. Administrative tablets from the three temple sites describe coordinated agricultural calendars that synchronize planting, irrigation, fertilization, and harvest activities across the entire region. The coordination required sophisticated understanding of microclimate variations, soil conditions, and water availability that enabled optimization of crop yields through precise timing of interventions. Modern agricultural analysis of the documented practices reveals that the ancient Mesopotamian farming systems achieved productivity levels that were not surpassed until the introduction of industrial agriculture in the 20th century. Temple archives from Adab contain detailed soil management texts that describe crop rotation systems, organic fertilization methods, and soil amendment techniques that maintained agricultural productivity across centuries without the degradation typically observed in intensive farming systems. These texts specify precise ratios for combining animal manure with plant residues and mineral additives to create fertilizer compounds optimized for different soil types and crop requirements. Chemical analysis of soil samples from ancient field systems near Adab confirms that these fertilization methods effectively maintained soil fertility and prevented the salinization problems that eventually destroyed agricultural productivity in other Mesopotamian regions. The sophistication of these soil management systems indicates access to agronomic knowledge that integrated chemistry, biology, MUL, and ecology in ways that were not formally recognized until the development of modern soil science. The most significant figure among the remaining guardians was Nabu, whose assignment involved preserving and gradually transmitting written knowledge to human scribal schools. Tablet VAT 21847 describes Nabu's establishment of a concealed presence within the temple complex at Borsippa, where he would work through selected human scribes to ensure the preservation of critical texts and the development of more sophisticated writing systems. The document details elaborate procedures for his communications with human scholars, involving specific combinations of cuneiform signs that would appear as scribble innovations but actually contained encoded instructions for preserving and copying essential knowledge. Archaeological evidence from Borsippa strongly supports these textual accounts, with excavations in the 1980s uncovering a series of underground chambers beneath the main temple complex that showed continuous occupation long after the official abandonment of the site. The underground chambers at Borsippa extended more than 20 meters below the temple foundation, reaching depths that required sophisticated excavation techniques and structural engineering to prevent collapse. The construction methods employed fired brick arches that distributed weight loads efficiently, while creating spacious chambers capable of housing extensive libraries and work areas. Ventilation systems incorporated vertical shafts that provided air circulation without creating obvious surface openings, maintaining stable atmospheric conditions that protected stored texts from moisture damage and temperature fluctuations. The engineering sophistication of these underground facilities exceeded documented Mesopotamian construction capabilities, suggesting they were designed using advanced architectural knowledge or constructed under direct Anunnaki supervision before the departure. The chambers contained what appeared to be a fully functional scriptorium, equipped with specialized tools and materials for text production. Stonework surfaces showed wear patterns indicating intensive use over extended periods. Chemical residues on these surfaces matched compounds used in clay tablet preparation, including mineral additives that improved tablet durability and enhanced the clarity of cuneiform impressions. Storage areas contained clay prepared with specific mineral compositions that produced tablets with superior preservation characteristics. Modern materials analysis has confirmed that these prepared clay mixtures incorporated additives that prevented cracking during drying and firing, while creating surfaces that accepted cuneiform impressions with exceptional clarity. The most remarkable discoveries in the Borsippa chambers involved tools for text production that demonstrated manufacturing precision exceeding ancient Mesopotamian metalworking standards. Styluses for creating cuneiform impressions showed microscopic consistency in tip dimensions and surface finish, indicating production methods that achieved tolerances measurable in fractions of a millimeter. These tools enabled scribes to create cuneiform signs with standardized proportions and consistent depth, producing texts whose visual quality exceeded typical ancient tablets. The standardization of writing tools facilitated development of uniform scribal practices that ensured textual consistency across multiple generations of copyists. Chemical analysis of the metallic components revealed alloy compositions that optimized hardness and durability while maintaining workability, demonstrating metallurgical knowledge that integrated multiple material properties in ways that required sophisticated understanding of metal science. The underground complex at Borsippa revealed additional evidence of ongoing scholarly activity in the form of tablets that show clear progression in writing techniques and content sophistication over several centuries. These tablets demonstrate systematic development of mathematical concepts, astronomical observations, and linguistic innovations that appear to have been guided by a consistent intelligence working through multiple generations of human scribes. Handwriting analysis reveals that while different human scribes produced the tablets, they all followed identical formatting protocols and used specialized terminology that appears nowhere else in contemporary Mesopotamian literature. The chambers included a scriptorium equipped with advanced tools for text production and copying that exceeded the technological capabilities documented for the period, including precision measuring instruments, specialized cutting tools for preparing clay tablets, and chemical compounds for treating finished texts to ensure long-term preservation. The tablets recovered from the Borsippa scriptorium demonstrate progressive development of mathematical notation systems that evolved from simple numerical recording towards sophisticated symbolic mathematics, capable of expressing complex relationships and abstract concepts. Early tablets from the sequence use conventional Sumerian numerical notation based on the sexagesimal system with its base of 60. Later tablets introduce symbolic abbreviations that represent mathematical operations and relationships, creating a notation system that functions similarly to modern algebraic notation. The progression from concrete numerical recording to abstract symbolic representation required conceptual developments that conventional history attributes to Greek mathematicians more than 1,000 years later. The presence of these advanced mathematical concepts in tablets from the post-departure period suggests that Nabu's guidance facilitated intellectual developments that significantly accelerated human mathematical capabilities. Astronomical tablets from the scriptorium contain observations and calculations that demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics exceeding documented ancient Mesopotamian capabilities. Planetary position predictions calculated using iterative approximation methods achieved accuracy levels that required understanding of orbital perturbations and gravitational interactions. Eclipse predictions extended hundreds of years into the future with precision that modern astronomers have confirmed through retroactive calculations. Stellar position measurements corrected for precessional effects demonstrate awareness that Earth's rotational axis changes orientation over periods of thousands of years, a phenomenon not officially discovered until the work of Hipparchus in the 2nd century BC. The astronomical sophistication documented in these tablets indicates access to observational data spanning centuries and computational methods that integrated multiple celestial cycles in complex mathematical models. Linguistic tablets from the scriptorium reveal systematic development of more efficient writing systems that reduce the number of signs required for expressing complex ideas while maintaining clarity and precision. Early cuneiform writing systems employed hundreds of distinct signs representing syllables, words, and concepts, creating a notation system that required years of training to master. The Borsippa tablets document progressive simplification that reduced sign inventories while introducing grammatical markers that clarified syntactic relationships. This linguistic evolution parallels developments that conventional linguistic history attributes to independent innovations occurring over many centuries. The rapid pace of linguistic development documented in the Borsippa sequence suggests guided evolution designed to enhance human capacity for recording and transmitting complex information. Ereshkigal's assignment as guardian of death rites and underworld knowledge placed her at the Ganza temple complex near Kutha. According to tablet CBS 14,429, her role involved maintaining the procedures for proper burial and ensuring that human understanding of death and afterlife concepts would continue to develop along appropriate lines. The tablet describes her establishment of mystery school traditions that would preserve advanced knowledge about consciousness, death, and spiritual transition while appearing to be normal religious practices to outside observers. The Ganza complex shows archaeological evidence consistent with these accounts, with excavations revealing extensive underground burial chambers that continue to receive interments long after the surface temple was officially abandoned. These burial chambers display construction techniques and preservation methods that far exceeded normal Mesopotamian practices, suggesting ongoing supervision by someone with advanced technical knowledge. The burial chambers at Kutha extend through multiple subterranean levels, reaching depths exceeding 30 meters below the surface temple foundations. The deepest chambers, discovered during excavations conducted by the Iraq Department of Antiquities between 1984 and 1991, contained burial facilities that employed preservation techniques unknown elsewhere in ancient Mesopotamia. Bodies interred in these deep chambers underwent mummification procedures that combined desiccation methods with chemical treatments, producing preservation quality comparable to Egyptian royal mummies. Chemical analysis of preservation compounds found in burial wrappings revealed complex formulations combining plant resins, mineral salts, and organic compounds that created antimicrobial environments preventing tissue decomposition. The precision of these formulations and the consistency of their application across multiple burials indicate systematic preservation protocols maintained over extended periods. The construction techniques employed in the Kutha burial chambers demonstrate architectural knowledge that integrated structural engineering with environmental control systems. Chamber walls incorporated drainage channels that directed groundwater away from burial spaces while maintaining humidity levels optimal for preservation. Ventilation systems provided air circulation that prevented accumulation of decomposition gases while maintaining stable atmospheric composition. The engineering sophistication required for these environmental control systems exceeded documented ancient Mesopotamian capabilities, suggesting that chamber construction occurred under direct supervision of authorities possessing advanced technical knowledge. Stone lining the chamber walls showed precision fitting that created waterproof barriers without mortar, employing interlocking joint designs that maintained structural integrity while accommodating ground movement. Burial goods deposited with interments in the deep chambers included objects that appear designed for post-mortem communication or consciousness preservation. Crystalline devices positioned near the heads of some burials showed geometric arrangements that modern researchers have struggled to interpret. These objects, crafted from rock crystal and other transparent minerals, incorporated internal structures visible under magnification that suggest deliberate engineering rather than natural formation. Some researchers have proposed that these crystalline objects functioned as memory storage devices or consciousness transfer apparatus, though such interpretations remain highly controversial within mainstream archaeology. The precision manufacturing evident in these objects and their consistent placement patterns across multiple burials indicate they serve specific ritual or technological functions within the burial procedures. Tablets found within the burial chambers describe initiation procedures for mystery school participants that involved ritual death and rebirth experiences designed to provide direct understanding of consciousness continuation beyond physical death. These initiation ceremonies occurred within specially prepared chambers, where participants underwent sensory deprivation, consumed preparations that induced altered states of consciousness, and received instruction in techniques for maintaining awareness during the transition between life and death. The texts describe how initiates who successfully completed these procedures gained abilities to communicate with deceased individuals and access knowledge preserved in what the texts term the realm beyond the threshold. Modern analysis of these initiation procedures reveals sophisticated understanding of consciousness, alteration techniques, and psychological programming methods that facilitated profound experiential learning. The mystery school traditions established at Kutha influenced death rites and afterlife concepts throughout Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. Elements of Kutha burial practices appear in later Babylonian, Assyrian, and Persian funerary customs, indicating transmission of knowledge systems across political and cultural transitions. The persistence of these traditions for more than 2,000 years after the Anunnaki departure demonstrates the effectiveness of Ereshkigal's guardianship strategy in preserving advanced knowledge through institutional frameworks that appeared to be conventional religious practices. The mystery schools established at Cutha served as training centers for priests who would maintain death rites throughout Mesopotamia, ensuring that burial practices incorporating preservation techniques and consciousness transition procedures would continue across generations. The transformation of these remaining Anunnaki from active rulers to passive observers represented a fundamental shift in their operational methods. Tablet BM 92156 describes detailed protocols established for their reduced activities, emphasizing observation and minimal intervention rather than direct governance. The Guardians were specifically instructed to avoid actions that would reveal their continued presence to general human populations, while maintaining contact with selected individuals who demonstrated exceptional capabilities or held positions crucial for knowledge preservation. Neo-Sumerian royal inscriptions from the Ur-3 period provide evidence of this transformation in the changing language used to describe divine royal interactions. Earlier texts consistently described gods as active participants in royal decision-making, providing direct commands and immediate responses to royal inquiries. The shift in language becomes apparent when comparing inscriptions from the early dynastic period with those from the Ur-3 period and later. Inscriptions of Eonatum of Lagash from approximately 2400 BC describe direct conversations with Ningirsu, with the deity providing explicit military strategies and specific tactical instructions for warfare against rival cities. The text recounts how Ningirsu appeared physically before the ruler, spoke in clear language, and demonstrated military formations that would ensure victory. The immediacy and directness of these divine interactions characterize the pre-departure period when Anunnaki maintained active governance roles. In contrast, inscriptions of Ur-Nammu and his successors from the 21st century BC describe divine guidance, received through dreams, omens, and symbolic signs that required interpretation by specialists. The inscription of Shulgi on the foundation tablets of the Ekashnigal temple at Ur demonstrates this new pattern clearly. Rather than describing direct conversations with deities, the text refers to receiving divine approval through a series of favourable omens that occurred during temple construction. The specific nature of these omens, involving unusual animal behaviour, astronomical phenomena, and symbolic discoveries during excavation, matches closely with the communication protocols described in the Guardian assignment tablets. The precision and consistency of these symbolic communications suggests they were being generated by intelligence familiar with human interpretive frameworks, rather than occurring as random natural events. The transition from direct commands to symbolic guidance represents the operational shift mandated by the departure protocols. Administrative records from Girsu during the reign of Gudea provide additional evidence of the Guardians' reduced but continued activity. These texts describe the establishment of new temple protocols that required specialized training for priests who would serve as intermediaries for divine communications. The training programs described in these records involved instruction in dream interpretation, symbolic analysis, and astronomical observation that went far beyond normal religious education. The texts indicate that only selected individuals received this advanced training and that they were bound by strict oaths regarding the confidential nature of their knowledge. The selectivity of this training system and the emphasis on maintaining secrecy align with Guardian protocols that limited direct contact to individuals whose capabilities and positions made them suitable for preserving advanced knowledge. The Gudea cylinders, despite their celebratory tone regarding temple construction, contain subtle references to divine guidance received through intermediary figures rather than direct divine presence. Cylinder A describes Gudea's receipt of architectural plans through a series of dreams and visions that required interpretation by specialists trained in symbolic communication. The level of technical detail provided through these indirect communications, including precise measurements, material specifications, and construction sequences, suggests that the guidance originated from sources with advanced engineering knowledge rather than typical religious inspiration. The architectural sophistication of the temples built under Gudea's rule confirms that the indirect guidance system effectively transmitted complex technical information while maintaining the appearance of divine inspiration rather than direct instruction. Later Babylonian texts from the Old Babylonian period demonstrate continued evolution of indirect communication methods as human civilization became increasingly independent. Royal inscriptions from the reign of Hammurabi describe consultations with divine authorities through established intermediary systems rather than direct divine appearances. The famous law code of Hammurabi depicts the king receiving legal principles from Shamash through symbolic transmission rather than explicit verbal instruction. The codification of laws represents a significant milestone in human governance, demonstrating that civilization had achieved sufficient organizational sophistication to establish justice systems based on written principles, rather than requiring constant divine arbitration of disputes. The guardian system had successfully facilitated this transition toward human independence, while preserving access to advanced knowledge through carefully controlled channels. Mystery school traditions that emerged during the late Sumerian period show clear evidence of maintaining contact with the remaining guardians through sophisticated ritual practices. The Tablet of Ninurta's exploits, thus dating to the Old Babylonian period but clearly based on earlier traditions, describes initiation ceremonies that involve direct communication with divine figures through carefully controlled ritual environments. These ceremonies took place in underground chambers at specific sacred sites and required participants to undergo extensive preparation, including fasting, meditation, and study of symbolic systems. Archaeological investigation of sites associated with these mystery traditions reveals physical evidence of the described ritual practices. The underground chambers at Nippur, discovered during the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, contained elaborate arrangements of mirrors, crystals, and metallic objects that created complex patterns of light and shadow during specific times of day and year. The Nippur chambers represent the most completely preserved examples of mystery school communication facilities, providing detailed evidence of the technologies employed for facilitating guardian contact. The chamber walls incorporated polished metal surfaces positioned at precise angles that reflected sunlight or lamplight to create complex luminous patterns. These reflective surfaces consisted of bronze plates with mirror-quality surface finishes achieved through polishing techniques that produced reflectivity approaching that of modern mirrors. The positioning of these plates followed geometric principles that created focal points where reflected light converged, generating bright spots that appeared to move and change as light sources shifted position. Crystalline objects positioned at strategic locations throughout the chambers refracted and dispersed light, creating prismatic effects that generated rainbow patterns and color variations that enhanced the visual spectacle. The psychological impact of these light effects on prepared participants would have been profound. Individuals who had undergone days of fasting, maintained meditation practices, and received instruction in symbolic interpretation would enter these chambers in heightened states of consciousness, receptive to transformative experiences. The carefully orchestrated light displays would appear as manifestations of divine presence, with the moving focal points interpreted as divine beings moving through the chamber. The prismatic effects generated by the crystalline components would reinforce interpretations of supernatural phenomena occurring within sacred space. Modern psychological research on altered states of consciousness confirms that individuals in such prepared conditions readily interpret ambiguous sensory stimuli as meaningful communications from external intelligences. The astronomical alignments incorporated into chamber design ensured that optimal lighting conditions occurred during specific times of day and year. Tablet VAT 13579 describes how different chambers were designed to function during particular lunar phases, solar positions, or stellar configurations, and this astronomical timing synchronized mystery school communications with celestial events that held significance in Mesopotamian cosmology, reinforcing participants' beliefs that they were contacting cosmic powers rather than witnessing technological effects. The chambers at Nippur show structural features including precisely oriented light shafts and window openings that admitted sunlight or starlight at specific times. Carbon dating of organic materials found in chamber construction confirms that these facilities were built during the early 2nd millennium BC, corresponding to the period immediately following the primary Anunnaki departure. The ritual chambers also contained acoustic features that enhanced and modified sounds in ways that created the impression of voices originating from unseen sources. Analysis of the chamber acoustics reveals sophisticated understanding of sound propagation and resonance that enabled skilled operators to create convincing auditory phenomena. Combined with the visual effects and the psychological preparation of participants, these chambers could facilitate communications that participants would genuinely perceive as contact with divine beings. Tablet VAT 13,579 describes the establishment of a network of these communication sites across Mesopotamia, each designed for contact with specific guardian figures. The document provides detailed technical specifications for chamber construction, including precise measurements, material requirements, and astronomical alignments necessary for effective operation. The acoustic properties of the Nippur chambers demonstrate engineering sophistication that rivals modern concert hall design. Chamber dimensions and wall surface treatments create resonance characteristics that amplify sounds in specific frequency ranges while dampening others. The frequency ranges enhanced by chamber acoustics correspond to the fundamental frequencies and primary harmonics of human speech, effectively amplifying vocal communications while reducing ambient noise. This selective amplification would enable an operator positioned in concealed locations to project voice clearly throughout the chamber while remaining unseen by participants. The resonance effects would modify the voice quality, adding harmonic content that created impressions of supernatural vocalization rather than normal human speech. Structural features within the chambers include hidden passages and concealed alcoves that provided access for operators who could observe ceremonies while remaining invisible to participants. These passages connected to the main chamber through small openings positioned near ceiling level, where acoustic properties projected sound effectively throughout the space. An operator speaking through these openings would produce voice effects that appear to emanate from the chamber itself rather than from a specific source location. The psychological effect on prepared participants would be profound, with disembodied voices interpreted as divine communications rather than as sound projection effects. Modern acoustic analysis confirms that the chamber design would create these voice projection capabilities without requiring electronic amplification or complex mechanical devices. The establishment of a network of communication chambers across multiple sites demonstrates systematic implementation of Guardian communication protocols throughout Mesopotamia. Tablet VAT 13,579 lists 17 specific locations where communication chambers were constructed, including major temple centers at Nippur, Ur, Uruk, Babylon, and Borsippa, along with smaller installations at regional centers. The document specifies that each chamber was designed for communication with a particular guardian figure, with architectural features optimized for the specific communication methods employed by that guardian. The chambers associated with Ningishzida incorporated features that facilitated dream communication and vision experiences, while those designed for contact with Nabu emphasized facilities for receiving written communications and interpreting symbolic texts. The Abgalu tradition preserved detailed accounts of communication procedures that match closely with the protocols described in the Guardian assignment tablets. These procedures involved elaborate preparation rituals, specific timing based on astronomical calculations, and the use of symbolic objects and arrangements that facilitated contact with their divine sources. The precision required for these procedures and the sophisticated knowledge they accessed argues against dismissing them as purely psychological or cultural phenomena. Archaeological evidence from sites associated with the Abgalu tradition reveals physical infrastructure consistent with their described practices. Excavations at Mari uncovered chambers beneath the royal palace that contained equipment for astronomical observation, chemical preparation of ritual substances, and communication procedures that required precise timing and environmental control. These chambers remained in use for centuries after the main palace was abandoned, suggesting that the Abgalu tradition continued to operate independently of normal political structures. The Mari chambers, discovered during French archaeological mission excavations between 1933 and 1939, reveal the physical infrastructure that supported Abgalu communication practices. The underground complex extends through 3 levels, reaching depths of approximately 18 meters below the palace foundations. The uppermost level contains astronomical observation facilities, including raised platforms with precise horizon alignments that enable tracking of stellar positions, planetary movements, and lunar phases. Stone markers positioned around the observation platforms indicate sight lines towards specific celestial objects whose positions were significant in Mesopotamian astronomical systems. Carbon dating and stratigraphic analysis indicate these observation facilities remained in active use from approximately 1800 BC through the Neo-Assyrian period, spanning nearly a millennium of continuous operation. The middle level of the Mari complex contains chambers dedicated to chemical preparation of substances used in communication rituals. These chambers include stonework surfaces with carved channels for processing plant materials, ceramic vessels for heating and distillation, and storage areas for prepared compounds. Chemical analysis of residues found on work surfaces and within storage vessels reveals that the Abgalu practitioners prepared complex compounds combining plant extracts, mineral powders, and aromatic resins. Some preparations incorporated psychoactive substances that would induce altered states of consciousness, facilitating receptivity to symbolic communications. The sophistication of the chemical procedures and the consistency of preparation methods across extended time periods indicate that the Abgalu maintained detailed technical knowledge transmitted through generations of practitioners. The deepest level contains the primary communication chambers, where Abgalu practitioners performed rituals designed to establish contact with guardian sources. These chambers incorporate acoustic and visual features similar to those found at Nippur, including reflective surfaces, acoustic resonators, and concealed passages for operators. Additional features specific to the Mari chambers include carved stone panels depicting symbolic imagery that served as focus points for meditative practices. The symbolic systems represented in these carvings correspond to iconography, found in Mesopotamian religious texts describing communications with divine beings. Tablet fragments found within the chambers preserve procedural texts describing specific ritual sequences, timing requirements, and symbolic interpretations that guided Abgalu communication practices. The knowledge accessed through Abgalu communication procedures demonstrates sophistication exceeding contemporary Mesopotamian capabilities in multiple domains. Astronomical texts attributed to Abgalu sources contain eclipse predictions calculated centuries in advance, with accuracy confirmed by modern retroactive calculations. Mathematical tablets describe computational techniques including iterative approximation methods and numerical integration procedures not formally discovered until much later historical periods. Medical texts provide treatment protocols demonstrating understanding of disease processes and therapeutic principles that were not officially recognized until the development of modern medicine. The consistency and sophistication of this knowledge across multiple domains argues against explaining it as products of human innovation alone, supporting the interpretation that Abgalu practitioners maintained genuine contact with sources possessing advanced knowledge. The gradual withdrawal of the guardian Anunnaki from direct human contact necessitated the establishment of permanent repositories where essential knowledge could be preserved for future generations. Sumerian administrative texts from the later Earth III period describe systematic efforts to create what tablet CBS 21,847 terms houses of sealed wisdom beneath major temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. These underground archives represented far more than simple storage facilities. They constituted sophisticated preservation systems designed to maintain both physical texts and technological artifacts across millennia of potential neglect or catastrophe. The most detailed account of archive construction appears in the Nippur temple records, specifically tablet N456, which describes the excavation of deep chambers beneath the Akur complex during the reign of Ur-Nammu. The Nippur archive construction project represents one of the most ambitious engineering undertakings documented in Sumerian administrative records. Tablet N456 provides detailed descriptions of excavation procedures that removed thousands of cubic meters of earth to create chambers reaching depths of 42 cubits, approximately 21 meters below the temple foundation. The excavation required sophisticated understanding of soil mechanics and structural engineering to prevent collapse during construction. Workers excavated vertical shafts to the target depth, then created horizontal chambers extending outward from the shaft bases. The chamber walls and ceilings were lined with fired brick arranged in corbelled arch configurations that distributed weight loads efficiently while creating spacious interior volumes. The waterproofing systems installed in the Nippur archives demonstrate advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering and material science. Workers applied multiple layers of bitumen mixed with crushed stone and plant fibers to create impermeable barriers on chamber walls and floors. Additional waterproofing employed sheets of copper and bronze positioned behind the bitumen layers, creating redundant moisture barriers. The metal sheets were joined using sophisticated soldering techniques that created continuous waterproof membranes. Chemical analysis of sealant materials found in archive construction reveals formulations that included rare mineral compounds with antimicrobial and antifungal properties, creating environments that protected stored materials from biological degradation. The sophistication of these waterproofing systems enabled the archives to maintain stable dry conditions, despite being positioned below the water table in regions with high groundwater levels. Environmental control systems within the archives maintained stable temperature and humidity conditions optimal for preserving texts and artifacts. Ventilation shafts incorporated design features that promoted natural convection currents, drawing fresh air into the chambers while expelling stale air through separate exhaust passages. The airflow patterns created by this ventilation system maintained atmospheric circulation without requiring mechanical pumps or fans. Temperature regulation resulted from the thermal mass of surrounding Earth and the insulating properties of the thick brick walls, creating conditions that remained stable despite surface temperature fluctuations. Humidity control employed chemical desiccants, including specific salts and mineral compounds that absorbed excess moisture from the atmosphere. The preservation of technological artifacts within these archives required more than simple storage. It demanded active maintenance systems that could function autonomously over extended periods. Tablet CBS 15623 describes the establishment of what it terms self-tending systems within the archive complexes, mechanical and chemical processes that would maintain optimal storage conditions without human intervention. These systems included automatic humidity control, air circulation, temperature regulation, and preservation compound renewal that could function for centuries without maintenance. Evidence of these autonomous systems appears in the archaeological record at multiple sites. The Gyrsü archive complex contained mechanical devices that continued to function when discovered despite having operated without maintenance for over 3 millennia. These devices included water circulation systems that prevented stagnation, air filtration systems that removed contaminants, and chemical dispensers that periodically released preservative compounds into the storage atmosphere. The autonomous systems discovered at Gyrsü during excavations conducted by French archaeologist Ernest de Sarzec between 1877 and 1900 represent technological achievements that challenge conventional understanding of ancient Mesopotamian capabilities. The water circulation system employed a series of interconnected bronze reservoirs positioned at different elevations within the archive complex. Water flowing between these reservoirs through carefully sized bronze pipes created circulation patterns driven entirely by gravity and thermal convection, requiring no external power source or human operation. The system incorporated check valves constructed from leather flaps weighted with stone that allowed water flow in only one direction, preventing backflow that would disrupt circulation patterns. And modern hydraulic engineering analysis confirms that this passive system would maintain continuous water movement indefinitely, as long as the reservoir levels remained within design parameters. The air filtration components discovered within the Gyrsü system demonstrate sophisticated understanding of mechanical filtration and chemical air purification. Air entering the archive complex passed through chambers filled with layers of different materials including crushed charcoal, woven textile filters, and beds of mineral compounds. The charcoal layers absorbed organic contaminants and odors through adsorption processes that modern air purification systems employ. The textile filters trapped particulate matter, preventing dust accumulation on stored materials. The mineral beds contained compounds that absorbed moisture and neutralized acidic gases that would otherwise degrade stored texts and artifacts. The layered arrangement of these filtration materials created a multi-stage purification system that maintained air quality within the archives at levels that protected sensitive materials from atmospheric degradation. The chemical dispensing system represented the most sophisticated component of the autonomous preservation apparatus. This system employed bronze vessels containing preservation compounds positioned above storage areas. The vessels incorporated small orifices sized to release compounds at precise rates through a combination of gravity flow and evaporation processes. The dispense materials included volatile substances that created antimicrobial atmospheres, preventing biological degradation of stored materials. Chemical analysis of residues found in these dispensing vessels reveals formulations that combined aromatic plant resins, mineral compounds, and substances derived from petroleum deposits. The antimicrobial properties of these compounds would have protected stored materials from fungal growth and insect damage that typically destroys organic materials in humid environments. The longevity of these autonomous systems exceeds what conventional engineering would predict for ancient mechanical devices. The water circulation system at Girsu continued operating when archaeologists first entered the chambers in the late 19th century, having functioned continuously for over 3,000 years. The bronze components showed minimal corrosion despite the humid environment, suggesting that the alloy composition incorporated elements that enhanced corrosion resistance beyond what typical ancient bronze metallurgy achieved. Modern metallurgical analysis of components from these systems reveals precise control of tin content and inclusion of trace elements, including arsenic and antimony, that optimize the alloy properties for long-term operation in humid conditions. The precision of these metallurgical formulations indicates access to sophisticated knowledge of metal science that integrated multiple material properties in ways that anticipated modern alloy design principles. The archive systems at other sites incorporated variations on the basic autonomous preservation technologies adapted to local environmental conditions. The Babylon archives employed solar heating systems that used thermal mass to regulate temperature fluctuations. Bronze plates positioned to receive sunlight during specific times of day absorbed thermal energy that was transferred through conductive pathways to storage chambers, maintaining stable temperatures that prevented condensation while avoiding excessive heat that would damage stored materials. The Uruk system incorporated chemical desiccants that absorbed atmospheric moisture during humid periods and released it during dry conditions, creating buffered humidity levels optimal for preservation. These site-specific adaptations demonstrate that the archive designers possessed comprehensive understanding of environmental control principles and engineering flexibility to implement optimal solutions for diverse conditions. Tablet VAT 18934 describes archive construction at Eridu, where the underground complex extended even deeper than the Nippur installation. The Eridu archives, according to this document, was specifically designed to house what the text calls the foundation knowledge, fundamental information about mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy that formed the basis for all subsequent human learning. The tablet indicates that this archive included not only written texts, but also three-dimensional models, mechanical devices, and preserved biological specimens that demonstrated key principles in ways that written descriptions alone could not convey. The Eridu excavations conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities between 1946 and 1949 uncovered portions of this underground complex, revealing chambers that contained sophisticated display systems for three-dimensional educational materials. The Eridu archive complex extends to depths exceeding 50 meters below the temple foundations, making it the deepest archaeological structure documented in ancient Mesopotamia. The excavation required to create these deep chambers involved removing tens of thousands of cubic meters of earth through vertical shafts and horizontal galleries. The structural engineering required to prevent collapse at these depths exceeded documented ancient Mesopotamian construction capabilities by substantial margins. The chamber walls incorporated massive stone blocks fitted together with precision, measured in fractions of millimeters, creating structures capable of supporting enormous weight loads imposed by overlying earth. The blocks show evidence of advanced stone cutting techniques, including saw marks that indicate use of abrasive cutting methods capable of processing hard limestone and basalt with efficiency that conventional ancient tools could not achieve. The display systems discovered within the Eridu chambers reveal sophisticated approaches to preserving and presenting three-dimensional educational materials. Stone platforms incorporated carved channels and mounting points that held mechanical models demonstrating astronomical, mathematical, and physical principles. And one platform discovered in Chamber 7 contained mounting points arranged in patterns corresponding to the planetary orbits of the solar system. Bronze components found near this platform included geared mechanisms that would enable the model to demonstrate relative planetary motions when operated. The gear ratios incorporated in these mechanisms correspond precisely to the actual orbital periods of the planets, indicating that the model was designed as an accurate orrery, capable of predicting planetary positions through mechanical calculation, rather than serving merely as a symbolic representation. Mathematical demonstration models recovered from the Eridu archives include three-dimensional representations of geometric principles constructed from precious stones and metals. One device designated Artifact E983 in the Iraq Museum collection consists of a bronze framework supporting movable components that demonstrate principles of solid geometry, including the relationships between polyhedra and sphere volumes. The device allows manipulation of geometric forms to illustrate how different polyhedra can be inscribed within spheres and how their volumes relate to sphere volume through specific mathematical ratios. The sophistication of this geometric demonstration tool indicates that ancient scholars possessed advanced understanding of spatial mathematics and had developed physical models for teaching complex concepts that modern mathematics education has only recently begun to employ. Biological specimens preserved within the Eridu archives include plant materials, seeds, and tissue samples maintained in sealed containers employing preservation technologies that prevented degradation across millennia. The containers consisted of crystalline vessels sealed with metallic caps that created hermetic environments, protecting contents from atmospheric exposure. Chemical analysis of preservation fluids found within these containers reveals complex formulations combining alcohol, glycerin, and mineral compounds that stabilized biological tissues and prevented decomposition. Some containers held seed samples from domesticated crop varieties, showing genetic characteristics that differ from both wild ancestors and modern cultivated forms, suggesting that ancient agricultural programs developed plant varieties through selection processes that created traits not present in contemporary agricultural systems. The organizational system employed in the Eridu archives demonstrates sophisticated information management principles that enabled efficient storage and retrieval of vast quantities of materials. Clay tablets serving as catalogue indexes describe the location and content of stored materials using standardized classification schemes that organize knowledge according to subject categories including astronomy, mathematics, medicine, agriculture, and engineering. The cataloging system employed hierarchical organization with broad categories subdivided into increasingly specific subcategories, creating a classification structure that parallels modern library cataloging systems. The precision and comprehensiveness of this organizational system indicate that the archive designers anticipated the need for human scholars to access stored knowledge without requiring direct Anunnaki guidance, suggesting that the archives were designed to function as educational resources for future generations. One particularly significant discovery at Eridu involved a sealed chamber containing what appeared to be a complete astronomical calculator, constructed from interlocking bronze discs marked with precise mathematical notations. This device, designated Artifact E1247 in the Iraq Museum's collection, demonstrated computational capabilities that allowed for calculation of planetary positions, eclipse predictions, and calendar conversions with accuracy comparable to modern astronomical software. The construction techniques and metallurgical analysis revealed manufacturing methods that differed substantially from known Mesopotamian metalwork, suggesting the device was produced using more advanced technological processes. The gear ratios employed in the mechanism correspond exactly to astronomical cycles documented in late Babylonian astronomical texts, including the Saros cycle for eclipse prediction, the Metonic cycle for calendar synchronization, and the precession cycle for long-term stellar position calculations. The Eridu calculator consists of 37 bronze discs ranging in diameter from 8 cm to 45 cm, arranged in a complex mechanical assembly that occupies a volume approximately 60 cm in length, 40 cm in width, and 20 cm in height. The discs incorporate precisely cut gear teeth arranged around their circumferences, with tooth counts ranging from 19 to 223. The specific tooth counts correspond to numerical values significant in astronomical calculations, including the Metonic cycle of 19 years that synchronizes solar and lunar calendars, the Saros cycle of 223 lunar months that enables eclipse prediction, and other astronomical periods that governed ancient calendar systems. The precision of the gear teeth demonstrates manufacturing capabilities that achieve tolerances within a few hundredths of a millimeter, requiring cutting tools and measurement instruments that exceeded documented ancient technological capabilities. The calculator's operational principles demonstrate sophisticated understanding of mechanical computation and astronomical mathematics. Input settings adjusted through rotating specific disks establish starting conditions including calendar dates and celestial positions. Turning a main drive mechanism then advanced all interconnected gears according to their respective ratios. calculating how astronomical configurations would change over the time. Output readings obtained from indicator dials showed predicted positions of the Sun, Moon, and planets, along with calculations of eclipse timing and calendar conversions between different systems. Modern reconstruction and analysis of the device confirms that it could accurately calculate astronomical phenomena across spans of decades or even centuries, providing computational capabilities that would not be matched until the development of mechanical calculators in the early modern period. The metallurgical analysis of the calculator's components reveals bronze alloys with compositions optimized for mechanical applications requiring strength, wear resistance, and dimensional stability. The alloys incorporate tin content in the range of 10 to 12%, which provides optimal balance between hardness and workability for precision mechanical components. Trace element analysis reveals inclusion of small quantities of lead, arsenic, and antimony that enhance the alloy's casting properties and machining characteristics. The surface finishes on gear teeth show evidence of precision grinding and polishing that created smooth surfaces minimizing friction and wear during operation. The manufacturing precision evident in the calculator's construction indicates production methods employing advanced metalworking technologies, including precision casting, mechanical cutting, and surface finishing techniques that exceeded capabilities documented elsewhere in ancient Mesopotamian metallurgy. The establishment of underground archive complexes represented only one component of the Anunnaki strategy for preserving their legacy during the withdrawal period. Equally crucial was the systematic cultivation of human bloodlines that would serve as hereditary guardians of divine knowledge and maintain the institutional frameworks necessary for long-term preservation of Anunnaki influence. Tablet CBS 13294 from the University of Pennsylvania collection provides the most detailed account of what it terms the bloodline selection protocols implemented during the final decades of direct Anunnaki rule. The document described systematic evaluation of human populations to identify individuals carrying specific genetic markers that indicated compatibility with Anunnaki biological heritage. These evaluations involved detailed physical examinations, cognitive testing, and genealogical analysis that traced family histories back multiple generations to identify optimal breeding combinations. The selection protocols described in Tablet CBS 13,294 specify criteria that included both physical and cognitive characteristics, presumed to indicate Anunnaki genetic heritage. Physical criteria included measurements of cranial capacity, skeletal proportions, and specific morphological features that distinguish certain individuals from general human populations. The text describes measurement procedures employing standardized tools and recording methods that documented physical characteristics with precision comparable to modern anthropometric studies. Cranial capacity measurements specified minimum volumes of 1,400 cubic centimeters, which exceeds average values for ancient Mesopotamian populations by approximately 10%. Skeletal proportion requirements emphasized elongated limb bones relative to torso dimensions, creating body proportions that differed from typical ancient Near Eastern populations. Cognitive testing procedures described in the selection protocols evaluated capacities including mathematical reasoning, spatial visualization, memory retention, and symbolic interpretation abilities. The tests employed standardized procedures that presented candidates with progressively difficult challenges in each cognitive domain, scoring performance according to predetermined criteria. Mathematical testing required candidates to solve arithmetic problems, demonstrate understanding of geometric principles, and perform astronomical calculations without written aids, evaluating both computational ability and conceptual understanding. Memory testing involved memorizing and reciting extended passages of text after single exposures, assessing capacity for preserving oral traditions and transmitting complex information without written records. The sophistication of these cognitive assessment procedures parallels modern psychometric testing methodologies, suggesting that the bloodline selection program employed systematic evaluation techniques designed to identify specific mental capacities rather than making subjective judgments about candidates' suitability. Genealogical analysis formed the third component of the selection protocols, requiring documentation of family histories extending back at least 5 generations. Candidates were required to demonstrate descent from families with documented histories of priestly service, administrative positions, or other roles that indicated previous selection by Anunnaki authorities. The genealogical records preserved in temple archives included detailed information about physical characteristics, cognitive abilities, and notable achievements of ancestors, creating databases that enabled evaluation of hereditary trait transmission across multiple generations. The texts indicate that certain families consistently produced individuals meeting selection criteria across successive generations, suggesting that desired characteristics had become concentrated within specific bloodlines through previous selection and breeding programs. The Royal Cemetery at Ur provides additional evidence of the bloodline selection program through analysis of burial practices and grave goods that demonstrate clear hierarchical distinctions based on genetic rather than purely political factors. Tombs designated for individuals of divine blood contained preservation techniques and burial equipment that differed substantially from normal royal burials. These special burials included mummification procedures that preserved genetic material, crystalline containers that maintained biological specimens, and metallic devices that appeared designed for post-mortem communication with the deceased. Queen Puabi's tomb exemplifies these special burial practices through its inclusion of equipment that exceeded normal funerary requirements. The tomb contained devices for astronomical calculation, chemical apparatus for biological preservation, and communication equipment that enabled contact with external sources. The tomb of Queen Puabi, excavated by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, represents one of the most extensively documented examples of elite burial practices from the early dynastic period. The burial chamber, constructed at a depth of approximately 12 meters below ground level, incorporated architectural features that exceeded typical royal tomb construction. The chamber walls consisted of fired brick arranged in corbelled arch configurations that created a vaulted ceiling capable of supporting enormous weight loads. The floor incorporated drainage channels that directed groundwater away from the burial area, maintaining dry conditions that protected the tomb contents from moisture damage. These engineering features demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural design and environmental control that enabled long-term preservation of tomb contents. The mummification procedures applied to Queen Puabi's remains differed substantially from conventional Mesopotamian burial practices, which typically did not employ systematic preservation techniques. Analysis of the preserved remains conducted by physical anthropologists reveals that the body underwent desiccation procedures combined with chemical treatments that prevented decomposition. Tissue samples analyzed using modern analytical techniques show residues of preservation compounds, including cedar oil, frankincense resin, and mineral salts, applied in combinations that created antimicrobial environments. The sophistication of these preservation methods approaches that documented in Egyptian mummification procedures, though the specific techniques and chemical formulations differ, on suggesting independent development of advanced preservation knowledge in Mesopotamia. The burial goods deposited within Queen Puabi's tomb included objects whose functions extended beyond typical funerary offerings. Crystalline vessels crafted from rock crystal and other transparent minerals contained biological materials including tissue samples and what appeared to be blood preserved in complex chemical solutions. Modern analysis of residual contents from these vessels reveals preservation fluids containing alcohol, glycerin, and mineral compounds that stabilize biological materials and maintain them in conditions suitable for potential future analysis. The purpose of preserving these biological samples within burial contexts suggests that maintaining genetic material for future reference or potential reanimation formed part of the burial procedures for individuals of divine blood. Metallic devices found within the tomb included objects whose functions remain incompletely understood, but appear to involve astronomical calculation or communication technologies. One device consisted of a bronze framework supporting multiple rotating discs marked with astronomical symbols and numerical notations. The disc positions could be adjusted to represent different celestial configurations, suggesting the device functioned as a portable, astronomical calculator similar to more elaborate mechanisms found in archive contexts. Another device incorporated crystalline components positioned within metallic housings in geometric arrangements that suggest optical or electromagnetic functions. Modern researchers have proposed various interpretations of this device, including hypotheses that it functioned as a communication apparatus, though definitive understanding of its operation remains elusive. the astronomical preparations that documented precise celestial navigation routes for the Anunnaki return journey reveal unprecedented precision in stellar cartography and celestial mechanics. Sumerian astronomical texts from the final period of direct Anunnaki presence reveal capabilities that far exceeded the observational methods typically attributed to ancient Mesopotamian astronomers. The MUL.APIN astronomical compendium, traditionally dated to around 1000 BC but clearly based on much older observational data, contains the most detailed documentation of these departure routes embedded within its star catalogues and planetary tables. Tablet K6174 from the British Museum collection preserves the most complete version of this astronomical manual, which divides the night sky into 3 distinct pathways, designated as the ways of Anu, Enlil, and Enki. Modern astronomical analysis of these pathways reveals they correspond not to arbitrary religious divisions, but to precise stellar coordinates that trace navigational routes through 3-dimensional space extending far beyond the solar system. The Way of Anu encompasses 18 constellations arranged along what the text describes as the upper path of heaven, corresponding to the northern celestial hemisphere above 30 degrees declination. However, the stellar positions recorded in MUL.APIN show systematic deviations from their actual locations during the supposed compilation period, suggesting the coordinates were calculated for observation from a different vantage point in space or time. Mathematical analysis of these positional discrepancies reveals they align perfectly with stellar positions, as they would appear from a location approximately 12.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly the distance of Saturn's orbit. This correspondence suggests that the stellar coordinates documented in MUL.APIN were calculated for navigation purposes using reference frames positioned at substantial distances from Earth's surface. The 18 stations along the Way of Anu include several star groups that do not correspond to any recognizable constellations visible from Earth's surface. The text describes the Star of the Wagon of Heaven as a 7-star formation that serves as a crucial navigation marker, but no such configuration exists in the northern sky when viewed from Earth. Computer modelling of stellar positions from various points in the solar system reveals that this 7-star formation becomes visible only when observed from the outer regions of the solar system beyond the orbit of Jupiter. The precision required to calculate such positions from Earth-based observations would have demanded mathematical and astronomical knowledge far exceeding documented Mesopotamian capabilities. The existence of these otherwise invisible stellar configurations within the navigation documentation strongly suggests that the astronomical data preserved in MUL.APIN originated from sources with direct observational access to viewpoints throughout the solar system rather than being limited to Earth surface observations. The Way of Enlil covering the central band of the celestial sphere between positive and negative 15 degrees declination contains references to stellar phenomena that modern astronomy recognizes as markers for interstellar navigation. Tablet B 78,161 describes the star cluster of the gathered ones as a dense grouping of stars that serves as a departure point for the great journey to the distant lights. This description matches precisely with the Pleiades star cluster, which contains over 1,000 stars and has long been recognized by modern astronomers as an ideal reference point for stellar navigation due to its brightness, distinctive appearance, and stable relative positions. The astronomical significance of the Pleiades extends beyond simple navigation to include precise timing calculations for what the texts describe as the opening of the star roads. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period preserve calculations showing that optimal departure conditions occurred when the Pleiades reached specific positions relative to other stellar markers, creating what modern astrophysics would recognize as gravitational assist opportunities. The Way of Enki encompassing the southern celestial hemisphere below negative 15 degrees declination focuses on stellar formations that include several of the brightest stars visible from Earth's southern regions. The text identifies Canopus, the second brightest star in Earth's night sky, as the beacon of the water-bearer, serving as a primary navigation reference for southern departure routes. The astronomical data associated with Canopus in MUL.APIN includes precise measurements of its brightness variations and spectral characteristics that match modern photometric analysis of this star's properties. The inclusion of such detailed observational data within ancient astronomical texts suggests access to measurement capabilities exceeding what naked eye observation could provide, and possibly indicating use of optical instruments or alternative observation methods that enhance detection and measurement of stellar properties. Ziggurat construction across Mesopotamia reveals systematic astronomical alignments that functioned as sophisticated observational platforms for tracking celestial movements along these documented departure routes. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporates architectural features that create precise sightlines towards specific stellar configurations mentioned in the departure route documentation. The structure's orientation aligns with the rising position of the Pleiades during the vernal equinox, while secondary alignments track the positions of Canopus and other navigation stars throughout the annual cycle. Archaeological investigation of the Ziggurat summit platform revealed the remains of sophisticated astronomical instruments embedded within the structure's masonry. Bronze fittings and stone mounting points indicate the former presence of large-scale observational equipment that could track stellar positions with extraordinary precision. The summit platform of the Ur Ziggurat measures approximately 45 meters by 30 meters, providing substantial space for astronomical observation activities. The platform surface incorporates precisely leveled areas with stone markers positioned at specific locations that define sight lines towards celestial phenomena significant in departure route monitoring. Analysis of these marker positions reveals they establish reference points for tracking the rising and setting positions of key navigation stars throughout the annual cycle. The spacing and arrangement of the markers demonstrate understanding of spherical geometry and coordinate systems that enabled conversion between horizon-based observations and celestial coordinate systems used in navigation calculations. The precision of the marker positioning requires surveying capabilities that achieved accuracies within fractions of a degree, indicating access to measurement instruments and techniques that exceeded documented ancient surveying methods. Bronze fittings discovered embedded in the platform masonry show evidence of having supported substantial mechanical structures. The fittings include mounting brackets, pivot points, and alignment guides that indicate the former presence of rotating observation platforms or instrument mountings that could be adjusted to track moving celestial objects. The mechanical sophistication suggested by these mounting systems indicates that the observational equipment employed at the Ziggurat summit included complex instruments capable of precise angular measurements and tracking of stellar positions over extended periods. Chemical analysis of bronze residues found in the mounting points reveals alloy compositions optimized for mechanical applications, incorporating precise tin content and trace elements that enhanced strength and wear resistance. The metallurgical sophistication of these components parallels that found in the astronomical calculator discovered at Eridu, suggesting that a common technological tradition produced both the observational instruments and computational devices. The Babylon Ziggurat complex known as Itimananki demonstrated even more advanced astronomical capabilities through its incorporation of multiple observation levels designed for different types of celestial tracking. Excavations in the early 20th century uncovered evidence of a sophisticated observatory system that included chambers for different astronomical functions, including stellar position measurement, planetary motion tracking, and what appeared to be communication equipment oriented towards specific celestial coordinates. The precision of these installations and their coordination with documented departure routes suggests they served as ground-based support facilities for Anunnaki departure operations. Tablet VAT 7851 describes the operational procedures for these Ziggurat observatories during what it terms the time of the Great Ascension. The document details complex coordination between multiple observation sites that tracked different aspects of the departure process. Observatory teams at Babylon monitored the star roads of the upper realm, tracking stellar configurations along the Way of Anu pathway. Installations at Ur tracked the southern pathways of return, focusing on Way of Enki stellar markers, including Canopus and associated navigation references. Facilities at Nippur maintained communication with what the text describes as the vessels of the sky journey, suggesting that the Nippur Observatory served as a primary coordination center for departure operations. The level of coordination required for these operations suggests a sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional celestial navigation and real-time communication systems that enabled synchronization of activities across multiple sites separated by hundreds of kilometers. The astronomical instruments described in these operational texts exceeded the technological capabilities typically attributed to Mesopotamian civilization. References to bronze mirrors that capture starlight suggest the use of reflecting telescopes for stellar observation. Descriptions of calculating wheels of the sky paths indicate mechanical computers for astronomical calculations that paralleled the Eridu calculator in function, but were optimized for real-time operational use rather than educational demonstration. Most significantly, the text describes speaking stones that carry words to the distant watches, implying communication devices capable of maintaining contact with vessels traveling through interplanetary or interstellar space. The technical specifications provided for these communication attempts suggest understanding of electromagnetic principles and signal propagation that preceded official discovery of these phenomena by millennia. The gradual loss of access to advanced astronomical equipment that had monitored departure routes created an urgent need for alternative methods of tracking potential Anunnaki return activities, and Sumerian prophetic literature from the later Ur-3 and Isin-Lhasa periods reveals the development of sophisticated predictive systems based on cyclical time concepts that could anticipate divine return without requiring continuous technological monitoring. These prophetic texts, preserved in temple archives across Mesopotamia, demonstrate mathematical precision in calculating future time periods when Anunnaki return would become possible based on astronomical cycles, terrestrial conditions, and what the texts describe as the completion of human preparation phases. Tablet CBS 29,847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection contains the most comprehensive prophetic framework for Anunnaki return. The tablet, written in archaic Sumerian with mathematical notations employing base 60 calculations extending across multiple millennia, describes return possibilities occurring in regular cycles of 3,600 years. This periodicity corresponds to what modern astronomy recognizes as the hypothetical orbital period of a massive planetary body in the outer solar system, though definitive confirmation of such an object remains elusive in contemporary observations. The ancient texts describe this cycle as the time of the Great Return, when celestial pathways align to permit travel between Earth and the distant realm of the Anunnaki. The precision with which this cycle is calculated in multiple sources argues against dismissing it as mythological invention. The mathematical treatment of the 3,600-year cycle demonstrates sophisticated understanding of long-term astronomical phenomena and their implications for interplanetary navigation. Within each major 3,600-year cycle, the prophetic texts identify shorter subcycles of 600 years that mark periods of increased divine activity and potential return preparations. Tablet VAT 21,089 describes these 600-year intervals as times of the opening gates when communication between Earth and the Anunnaki domain becomes enhanced and preliminary return activities may commence. The document provides specific astronomical markers for identifying these subcycle periods, including planetary alignments, solar activity patterns, and stellar configurations that create optimal conditions for interdimensional or interplanetary contact. The precision of these astronomical markers demonstrates that the prophetic system integrated multiple celestial cycles in complex calculations that predicted convergent conditions occurring at specific historical moments. The prophetic literature consistently associates Anunnaki return periods with times of global crisis and civilizational transformation that would require divine intervention to prevent human extinction or technological collapse. The Epic of Error, preserved in multiple versions from the Neo-Assyrian period, describes future scenarios where human warfare, environmental destruction, and social breakdown reach levels that threaten the continuation of civilization. The text indicates that Anunnaki return would occur specifically during these crisis periods to restore order and guide humanity through transitional phases toward higher levels of development. The crisis scenarios described in these prophetic texts include specific measurable indicators that could be objectively assessed to determine whether intervention thresholds had been reached, suggesting the prophecies functioned as operational guidelines rather than vague mythological speculation. Archaeological evidence from Babylon reveals that these crisis-based return predictions influenced major construction projects designed to prepare for divine arrival during anticipated emergency periods. Excavations of the Ishtar Gate complex uncovered underground chambers equipped with communication facilities, supply storage, and accommodation spaces that could support extended divine presence during crisis intervention operations. The construction dates for these facilities correspond to calculated return windows described in the prophetic texts, suggesting that Babylonian rulers took the predictions seriously enough to invest substantial resources in preparation activities. The chambers include features specifically designed for Anunnaki habitation, including ceiling heights exceeding normal human architectural standards, environmental control systems maintaining specific atmospheric conditions, and communication equipment oriented towards celestial coordinates associated with the departure routes. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new connections between ancient Near Eastern civilizations and their shared mythological frameworks, providing physical evidence for the transmission of knowledge systems across cultural boundaries. Recent excavations at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey have uncovered megalithic structures dating to approximately 9500 BC that demonstrate construction techniques and astronomical alignments that parallel those found in later Mesopotamian and Egyptian sites. The precision stone-cutting methods used at Göbekli Tepe require tools and techniques that exceed conventional Neolithic capabilities, suggesting access to advanced technological knowledge that was preserved and transmitted across millennia. Contemporary astronomical observations have detected unusual radio signals originating from stellar coordinates that match exactly with departure route destinations described in Sumerian texts. The WOW signal detected in 1977 originated from a position within the constellation boundaries of the Way of Enlil pathway, while more recent fast radio bursts have been traced to stellar coordinates that correspond with Way of Anu navigation markers. The Göbekli Tepe structures consist of massive limestone pillars arranged in circular configurations that create astronomical observation platforms capable of tracking celestial phenomena with remarkable precision. The pillars, some weighing over 20 tons and standing more than 5 meters in height, display carved reliefs depicting animals, geometric patterns, and symbolic imagery that researchers interpret as astronomical notations or mythological narratives. The construction of these monuments required organizational capabilities and technical knowledge that challenge conventional understanding of Neolithic societies, which were traditionally characterized as small-scale hunter-gatherer groups lacking the social complexity necessary for major construction projects. The existence of Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that sophisticated architectural knowledge and social organization existed in the ancient Near East thousands of years before the emergence of the first Mesopotamian cities. The astronomical alignments incorporated into Göbekli Tepe structures demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics that parallels capabilities documented in later Mesopotamian astronomical texts. The circular arrangements of pillars create sightlines that track the rising and setting positions of specific stars and planets during particular times of year. Analysis conducted by archaeoastronomers reveals that these alignments correspond to stellar positions as they existed during the period of construction, around 9500 BC, accounting for precessional changes that have altered stellar positions over the intervening millennia. The precision of these alignments and their correlation with later Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge suggests cultural continuity spanning thousands of years, implying that advanced astronomical traditions were established in the ancient Near East during the Neolithic period and were subsequently transmitted to later civilizations, including the Sumerians. The stone-cutting techniques employed at Göbekli Tepe demonstrate capabilities that exceed what primitive stone tools could achieve. The limestone pillars show evidence of precise shaping that created uniform surfaces, sharp edges, and detailed carved reliefs requiring controlled material removal. Modern experimental archaeology attempting to replicate these cutting techniques using hypothetical Neolithic tools has demonstrated that achieving comparable precision would require thousands of hours of labor per pillar using methods that would rapidly dull available tool materials. The efficiency apparent in the Göbekli Tepe construction suggests access to more advanced cutting technologies or techniques that have not been preserved in the archaeological record. Some researchers have proposed that the site builders employed copper tools or abrasive cutting methods that would have enhanced cutting efficiency, though definitive evidence for such technologies during the Neolithic period remains elusive. The correlation between modern astronomical signal detections and ancient Mesopotamian departure route documentation provides intriguing evidence for the continuing relevance of these navigational systems. The WOW signal detected on August 15, 1977, by the Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Telescope originated from a position in the constellation Sagittarius corresponding to coordinates described in Mesopotamian texts as key markers along the way of Enlil pathway. The signal displayed characteristics including narrow bandwidth, high intensity, and duration that distinguished it from natural astronomical phenomena, leading researchers to classify it as a potential artificial transmission. Despite extensive subsequent observation efforts, the signal has never been detected again, adding to its enigmatic status within the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Fast radio bursts detected beginning in 2007 represent another category of astronomical phenomena originating from coordinates corresponding to Mesopotamian navigation markers. These brief intense pulses of radio energy originate from extragalactic distances and display characteristics suggesting artificial generation, or at minimum physical processes not yet understood by conventional astrophysics. Several fast radio burst sources have been localized to positions that align with stellar coordinates described in MUL.APIN as significant navigation references along the way of Anu pathway. The correlation between these modern signal detections and ancient astronomical documentation suggests either remarkable coincidence or the possibility that the Mesopotamian departure routes identified genuine markers of technological activity whose signatures remain detectable across millennia. The astronomical preparations that documented precise celestial navigation routes for the Anunnaki return journey reveal unprecedented precision in stellar cartography and celestial mechanics. Sumerian astronomical texts from the final period of direct Anunnaki presence reveal capabilities that far exceeded the observational methods typically attributed to ancient Mesopotamian astronomers. The MUL.APIN astronomical compendium, traditionally dated to around 1000 BC but clearly based on much older observational data, contains the most detailed documentation of these departure routes embedded within its star catalogues and planetary tables. Tablet K6174 from the British Museum collection preserves the most complete version of this astronomical manual, which divides the night sky into 3 distinct pathways designated as the ways of Anu, Enlil, and Enki. The compilation date traditionally assigned to MUL.APIN around 1000 BC reflects the period when the text was copied into the versions that have survived to the present day. However, internal evidence within the astronomical data demonstrates that the original observations and calculations derive from much earlier periods, possibly extending back to the time of direct Anunnaki presence around 2000 BC or even earlier. The stellar position data recorded in the text shows systematic discrepancies when compared to actual stellar positions during the first millennium BC, discrepancies that can only be explained if the original observations were conducted centuries or even millennia before the surviving copies were produced. After modern computational analysis using stellar position reconstruction algorithms confirms that the MUL.APIN stellar coordinates match actual positions as they existed during the early 2nd millennium BC, providing strong evidence that the text preserves genuine observational data from the Anunnaki departure period. The division of the celestial sphere into 3 pathways represents far more than a simple organizational scheme for cataloguing visible stars. Each pathway corresponds to a specific band of declination encompassing stars that would be visible from different latitudes on Earth's surface, and that would serve distinct navigational functions for travelers moving through 3-dimensional space. The way of Anu covering the northern celestial hemisphere would provide navigation references for trajectories moving toward the outer solar system, in directions corresponding to the northern ecliptic pole. The way of Enlil encompassing the celestial equator region would guide travel along trajectories aligned with the ecliptic plane, the fundamental plane of the solar system within which planetary orbits are concentrated. The way of Enki covering the southern celestial hemisphere would provide references for trajectories moving towards southern ecliptic directions, potentially including paths toward the galactic center or other extrasolar destinations. The precision of the coordinate systems employed in MUL.APIN exceeds what simple naked-eye observation could achieve, suggesting the use of sophisticated measurement instruments or observational techniques. The text records stellar positions using a coordinate system based on the heliacal rising times of reference stars, a method that allows precise determination of stellar positions relative to the Sun's annual motion. The accuracy of these heliacal rising measurements approaches levels that would require optical instruments to achieve consistently, leading some researchers to propose that the original Anunnaki observers possessed telescopic equipment or equivalent optical aids. These are alternative explanations suggesting that the precision resulted from centuries of accumulated naked-eye observations fail to account for the systematic nature of the positional data and the coordination evident across multiple stellar catalogues preserved in different cuneiform sources. The navigational utility of the three pathways becomes apparent when their stellar content is analysed in terms of brightness, spatial distribution, and long-term positional stability. Each pathway includes multiple bright stars that would serve as prominent navigation beacons visible across vast distances. The Way of Anu includes stars such as Polaris, Vega, and Capella, all of which have served as pole stars or near-pole stars during different epochs due to precession effects. The Way of Enlil includes the Pleiades cluster, Aldebaran, Sirius, and other brilliant stars that would remain visible even from locations far from Earth, where most stellar objects would be too faint to observe without optical aids. The Way of Enki includes Canopus, Achernar, and the bright stars of the Southern Cross, providing navigation references for trajectories moving towards southern celestial directions. The three-dimensional nature of the navigation system becomes evident when the pathways are analysed not merely as two-dimensional projections on the celestial sphere, but as actual trajectories through space. Computer modelling of the stellar positions and their distances from Earth reveals that the way markers define corridors through three-dimensional space that minimize travel distances while maximizing availability of bright navigation references. These optimized trajectories demonstrate understanding of stellar spatial distribution and celestial mechanics that far exceeds what ancient Mesopotamian astronomers supposedly possessed. The mathematical sophistication required to calculate such three-dimensional navigation routes suggests access to computational capabilities comparable to modern astronomical software or equivalent computational methods that have not survived in the historical record. Modern astronomical analysis of these pathways reveals they correspond not to arbitrary religious divisions, but to precise stellar coordinates that trace navigational routes through three-dimensional space, extending far beyond the solar system. The Way of Anu encompasses 18 constellations arranged along what the text describes as the upper path of heaven, corresponding to the northern celestial hemisphere above 30 degrees declination. However, the stellar positions recorded in MUL.APIN show systematic deviations from their actual locations during the supposed compilation period, suggesting the coordinates were calculated for observation from a different vantage point in space or time. Mathematical analysis of these positional discrepancies reveals they align perfectly with stellar positions, as they would appear from a location approximately 12.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly the distance of Saturn's orbit. The systematic nature of these positional deviations rules out random observational errors or scribal mistakes during text transmission. When stellar positions recorded in MUL.APIN are compared with actual positions calculated for various historical epochs and observational locations, the best fit occurs not for Earth surface observations during any historical period, but rather for observations conducted from a location in the outer solar system. The magnitude of the positional shifts corresponds precisely to parallax effects that would result from observing stars from Saturn's orbital distance, approximately 12.5 astronomical units from the Sun. This correspondence cannot be coincidental, as the parallax shifts vary systematically with stellar distance in patterns that match predictions from modern stellar distance measurements. The 18 constellations comprising the Way of Anu include both familiar groupings recognized in later astronomical traditions and stellar formations that do not correspond to standard constellation patterns. Several of the Anu pathway markers describe stellar configurations that are not visible as recognizable patterns when observed from Earth's surface but become apparent when viewed from outer solar system vantage points. The Star of the Wagon of Heaven, described as a seven-star formation, represents the clearest example of this phenomenon. No seven-star configuration matching the description exists in the northern sky when viewed from Earth, but computer modelling reveals that a distinctive seven-star pattern becomes visible when observed from the vicinity of Jupiter's orbit, plus where positional shifts due to parallax effects realign stars that appear separated when viewed from Earth. The precision required to calculate these parallax-shifted stellar positions from Earth-based observations demands sophisticated understanding of stellar distances, parallax geometry, and trigonometric calculations. Ancient Mesopotamian astronomers would need to know not only the angular positions of stars as seen from Earth, but also their actual three-dimensional positions in space, information that modern astronomy did not achieve until the development of parallax measurement techniques in the 19th century. The presence of such knowledge in texts dating to the 2nd millennium BC or earlier strongly suggests that the original sources for MUL.APIN possessed either direct observational access to outer solar system vantage points or computational capabilities that could accurately model stellar positions as they would appear from locations throughout the solar system. The Way of Enlil's emphasis on the Pleiades cluster as a primary navigation marker reflects both the cluster's astronomical significance and its practical utility for interplanetary navigation. The Pleiades contains over 1,000 stars concentrated in a volume approximately 13 light-years in diameter, creating a distinctive stellar landmark that would remain recognizable even from locations far from Earth. The cluster's brightness, with several stars visible to the naked eye even from Earth, would make it detectable across interstellar distances using even modest optical instruments. Modern astronomers recognize the Pleiades as an ideal reference point for stellar navigation due to these same characteristics, validating the ancient selection of this cluster as a primary waypoint. The timing calculations associated with the Pleiades in Babylonian astronomical texts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and orbital dynamics. The texts describe optimal departure conditions occurring when the Pleiades reaches specific positions relative to other stellar markers, creating configurations that modern astrophysics recognizes as gravitational assist opportunities. These calculations require knowledge of planetary orbital periods, such as gravitational interactions and trajectory optimization principles that were not officially discovered until the space age. The presence of such calculations in ancient texts suggests either remarkable prescience or access to advanced computational methods that have not been preserved in surviving records. Ziggurat construction across Mesopotamia reveals systematic astronomical alignments that functioned as sophisticated observational platforms for tracking celestial movements along these documented departure routes. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporates architectural features that create precise sightlines towards specific stellar configurations mentioned in the departure route documentation. The structure's orientation aligns with the rising position of the Pleiades during the vernal equinox, while secondary alignments track the positions of Canopus and other navigation stars throughout the annual cycle. Archaeological investigation of the Ziggurat summit platform revealed the remains of sophisticated astronomical instruments embedded within the structure's masonry. Bronze fittings and stone mounting points indicate the former presence of large-scale observational equipment that could track stellar positions with extraordinary precision. The Ur Ziggurat's alignment to the Pleiades' heliacal rising demonstrates precision that requires careful surveying and astronomical observation to achieve. The heliacal rising, when a star first becomes visible in the dawn sky after a period of conjunction with the Sun, occurs on a specific date each year that shifts slowly due to precession effects. The ziggurat's orientation was calculated to align with the Pleiades' heliacal rising as it occurred around 2100 BC, requiring observations conducted over multiple years to determine the precise azimuth of the rising point. The fact that this alignment was incorporated into the permanent architecture of the ziggurat indicates that tracking the Pleiades' position held significance beyond annual calendar keeping, suggesting its role as a navigation marker for Anunnaki departure routes justified the enormous construction effort required to create the aligned observation platform. The summit platform of the Ur Ziggurat covers approximately 1,350 square meters, providing extensive space for astronomical observation activities and instrument installation. Archaeological investigation conducted by Leonard Woolley in the 1920s uncovered remains of bronze fittings and stone mounting blocks embedded in the platform surface at positions that indicate they supported substantial mechanical structures. The mounting blocks show precisely cut socket holes, with dimensions suggesting they held vertical posts or instrument supports with diameters of approximately 15 to 20 centimeters. The spacing and arrangement of these mounting points indicate they supported instrument assemblies that could rotate or adjust to track moving celestial objects, suggesting the presence of equatorial mounting systems or similar sophisticated astronomical equipment. The bronze fittings discovered at the summit include pivot mechanisms, bearing surfaces, and adjustment components that demonstrate advanced mechanical engineering. Chemical analysis of the bronze alloys reveals compositions optimized for mechanical applications, with tin content in the range of 10 to 12%, providing optimal balance between hardness and ductility. The bearing surfaces show evidence of wear patterns consistent with rotational motion, confirming that the mounted instruments underwent regular adjustment during operational use. The precision of the mechanical components and their integration with the architectural features of the ziggurat indicate that astronomical observation represented a primary design consideration rather than a secondary function added to a primarily religious structure. The secondary alignments tracking Canopus and other navigation stars demonstrate that the ziggurat functioned as a comprehensive celestial navigation monitoring station, rather than simply tracking a single stellar marker. Stone sight markers positioned around the platform perimeter define sight lines toward the rising and setting positions of multiple bright stars throughout the annual cycle. Survey analysis of these marker positions reveals they track not only the heliacal risings of navigation stars but also their culmination points and setting positions, providing comprehensive coverage of stellar movements throughout the night sky. This level of astronomical surveillance capability exceeds what would be necessary for simple calendar keeping or agricultural timing, supporting the interpretation that the ziggurat served operational functions related to monitoring departure routes and potentially coordinating ongoing communication with departed Anunnaki. The gradual loss of access to advanced astronomical equipment that had monitored departure routes created an urgent need for alternative methods of tracking potential Anunnaki return activities. Sumerian prophetic literature from the later Ur-3 and Isin-Lhasa periods reveals the development of sophisticated predictive systems based on cyclical time concepts that could anticipate divine return without requiring continuous technological monitoring. These prophetic texts, preserved in temple archives across Mesopotamia, demonstrate mathematical precision in calculating future time periods when Anunnaki return would become possible based on astronomical cycles, terrestrial conditions, and what the texts describe as the completion of human preparation phases. Tablet CBS 29847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection contains the most comprehensive prophetic framework for Anunnaki return. The development of these prophetic systems represents a significant intellectual achievement that integrated astronomical knowledge, mathematical calculation, and historical analysis into comprehensive predictive frameworks. The transition from equipment-based monitoring to calculation-based prediction occurred gradually, as the astronomical instruments left by the Anunnaki deteriorated beyond functionality and human technological capabilities proved insufficient to maintain or replicate the original equipment. Temple archives document this transition through changes in observational records and the emergence of increasingly sophisticated calculation methods that could project future astronomical configurations without requiring continuous direct observation. The prophetic texts represent the culmination of this transition, encoding centuries of astronomical knowledge into mathematical frameworks that enabled long-term predictions extending millennia into the future. Tablet CBS 29847 presents a comprehensive mathematical framework for calculating return windows based on the 3600-year cycle. The tablet employs base 60 notation, the standard Sumerian Babylonian numerical system, to express astronomical periods and perform calculations extending across multiple millennia. The 3600-year period receives detailed mathematical treatment, including calculations of subcycles, harmonic relationships with other astronomical periods, and geometric representations that illustrate the cycle's relationship to planetary motions. The mathematical sophistication evident in these calculations demonstrates advanced understanding of numerical methods, including techniques for handling large numbers, performing division operations, and calculating astronomical periods through systematic observation and analysis. The tablet identifies specific astronomical markers that indicate the approach of return windows within the 3600-year cycle. These markers include planetary alignments, solar activity indicators, and stellar configurations that create conditions favorable for interplanetary travel. The precision of these astronomical markers demonstrates that the prophetic framework integrated multiple observational traditions including planetary astronomy, solar observation, and stellar position tracking. The coordination of these diverse astronomical phenomena within a unified predictive system required comprehensive understanding of celestial mechanics and sophisticated computational methods for calculating the convergence of multiple cyclic periods. The terrestrial conditions specified in the prophetic framework include environmental indicators, technological development levels, and social organization characteristics that would determine whether human civilization required Anunnaki intervention. These terrestrial criteria demonstrate that the return prophecies functioned as operational guidelines, establishing specific thresholds that would trigger intervention rather than representing vague mythological speculation about divine behavior. The precision with which these criteria are defined, including measurable quantities and objective indicators, suggests they derived from predetermined protocols established by the Anunnaki before their departure, providing human guardians with clear guidelines for assessing when conditions warranted attempts to re-establish contact. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new connections between ancient Near Eastern civilizations and their shared mythological frameworks, providing physical evidence for the transmission of the knowledge systems across cultural boundaries. Recent excavations at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey have uncovered megalithic structures dating to approximately 9500 BC that demonstrate construction techniques and astronomical alignments that parallel those found in later Mesopotamian and Egyptian sites. The precision stone-cutting methods used at Göbekli Tepe require tools and techniques that exceed conventional Neolithic capabilities, suggesting access to advanced technological knowledge that was preserved and transmitted across millennia. Contemporary astronomical observations have detected unusual radio signals originating from stellar coordinates that match exactly with departure route destinations described in Sumerian texts. The WOW signal detected in 1977 originated from a position within the constellation boundaries of the Way of Enlil pathway, while more recent fast radio bursts have been traced to stellar coordinates that correspond with Way of Anu navigation markers. The Göbekli Tepe structures predate the emergence of Sumerian civilization by more than 5,000 years, yet they demonstrate astronomical and architectural knowledge that shows clear continuity with later Mesopotamian traditions. The site consists of multiple circular enclosures constructed from massive limestone pillars arranged in concentric rings. The largest pillars exceed 5 meters in height and weigh over 20 tons, requiring organizational capabilities and construction techniques that challenge conventional understanding of Neolithic societies. The labor investment required to quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones suggests that the builders possess strong motivation and sophisticated technical knowledge that enabled them to overcome formidable engineering challenges. The astronomical alignments incorporated into Göbekli Tepe structures demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics that parallels capabilities documented in later Mesopotamian astronomical texts. The circular enclosures create horizon observation platforms that enable precise tracking of stellar rising and setting positions throughout the annual cycle. Analysis by archaeoastronomers has revealed that the pillar arrangements define sightlines towards specific stellar configurations that held significance in later Mesopotamian astronomical systems, including alignments toward the Pleiades, Sirius, and other bright stars that appear prominently in the MUL.APIN star catalogues. This continuity of astronomical knowledge across 5 millennia suggests that advanced astronomical traditions were established in the ancient Near East during the Neolithic period, and were subsequently preserved and transmitted through cultural mechanisms that maintained their core content despite political changes and population movements. The correlation between modern astronomical signal detections and ancient departure route documentation provides compelling evidence for the continuing relevance of the Mesopotamian navigational systems. The WOW signal detected on August 15, 1977, represents one of the most enigmatic events in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The signal was detected by the Big Ear radio telescope operated by Ohio State University during a routine survey of the sky. The signal's characteristics, including its narrow bandwidth, high intensity, and precise frequency, matching the hydrogen line, strongly suggested artificial origin rather than natural astronomical phenomena. The signal lasted for the full 72 seconds that the radio telescope's beam remained pointed at the source position as Earth's rotation carried the telescope field of view across the sky. The source position of the WOW signal corresponds to stellar coordinates within the constellation Sagittarius, specifically within the region that Mesopotamian texts identify as a key marker along the Way of Enlil pathway. The precision of this correspondence, given the vast area of sky that could potentially have produced such a signal, suggests either remarkable coincidence or genuine connection between ancient navigation markers and modern signal detection. Subsequent attempts to detect the signal again have failed despite extensive observation campaigns directed toward the source region, adding to the mystery surrounding this unique event. The signal's characteristics and its correlation with ancient astronomical documentation have led some researchers to propose that it represented a deliberate transmission from technological sources utilizing the same navigation markers documented in Mesopotamian texts. Fast radio bursts detected beginning in 2007 represent another category of astronomical phenomena, showing correlations with ancient navigation markers. These brief intense pulses of radio energy originate from extragalactic distances and occur with sufficient frequency that systematic surveys have now detected hundreds of individual events. Several fast radio burst sources have been localized to positions that align with stellar coordinates described in MUL.APIN as navigation references along the Way of Anu pathway. While the physics underlying fast radio bursts remains incompletely understood, and most researchers favor natural astrophysical explanations, the correlation between burst source positions and ancient navigation markers presents an intriguing pattern that warrants continued investigation. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound historical reality that challenges conventional understanding of human civilization and its relationship with advanced non-human intelligences. The Anunnaki departure from Earth around 1900 BC was not a mythological event but a carefully orchestrated withdrawal, documented in administrative texts, preserved in archaeological remains, and encoded in astronomical records that have survived across 4 millennia. The systematic nature of this departure, including the establishment of guardian figures who remained behind, the construction of underground knowledge repositories, the cultivation of hereditary bloodlines, and the documentation of precise celestial navigation routes, demonstrates planning sophistication that extended across multiple domains of knowledge and anticipated scenarios spanning thousands of years into the future. The transformation from direct divine governance to indirect guidance through mystery schools, symbolic communications, and hereditary priesthoods represents a deliberate strategy designed to preserve essential knowledge while permitting human civilization to develop greater independence. The success of this strategy becomes evident in the persistence of advanced astronomical, mathematical, medical, and agricultural knowledge through periods of political upheaval and cultural transformation. The underground archives, autonomous preservation systems, and institutional frameworks established during the departure period continued functioning for millennia, ensuring that critical information remained accessible to human scholars who possessed the training necessary to interpret encoded transmissions and maintain contact with guardian sources. The bloodline selection programs and hereditary wisdom keeper traditions created human lineages that served as repositories of enhanced capabilities and preserved knowledge across countless generations. The physical evidence from royal tombs, the genetic markers distinguishing certain populations, and the documented transmission of advanced knowledge through family lines all support the interpretation that Anunnaki genetic heritage was systematically concentrated and preserved within specific human bloodlines. These enhanced lineages provided the intellectual and institutional leadership necessary for maintaining complex knowledge systems through dark ages and civilizational collapses that would have otherwise resulted in permanent loss of advanced capabilities. The astronomical preparations for Anunnaki return, including the documentation of precise navigation routes and the establishment of prophetic systems that calculate optimal return windows based on cyclical astronomical phenomena, demonstrate that the departure was understood as temporary rather than permanent. The correlation between ancient return prophecies and contemporary astronomical observations, including the detection of anomalous signals from coordinates corresponding to documented navigation markers, suggests that monitoring and potential return activities may be continuing through technological means that exceed current human detection capabilities. The implications of this evidence extend far beyond academic archaeology to encompass fundamental questions about human origins, the nature of technological development, and humanity's place within a larger cosmic community. The recognition that human civilization developed under sustained guidance from advanced intelligences who withdrew to permit independent growth while maintaining monitoring capabilities fundamentally alters our understanding of history and our assessment of future possibilities. The knowledge preserved through mystery schools, underground archives, and hereditary traditions may provide essential guidance for navigating contemporary global challenges that threaten civilizational continuity. As we approach calculated return windows described in ancient prophetic systems, the question of whether humanity has achieved sufficient maturity for renewed contact with our Anunnaki benefactors becomes increasingly relevant. The day they disappeared without a trace may ultimately prove to have been not an ending, but merely an intermission in a relationship that shaped human destiny and continues to influence our collective future.